So I'm adding card content to the Victoria Marie YouTube channel. Find out all about it next. Hey, I'm Victoria and welcome to the Victoria Marie YouTube channel where I feature all things scrapbooking and paper crafting. If you like that type of content, make sure you hit the subscribe button when you do click the bell. That way you'll be notified each and every time new video posts to this channel. So I have been on YouTube for 9 years, and as a lot of content creators such as myself who've been on this platform for a long time, sometimes we need some other creative outlets. And so towards the beginning, or actually towards the end of last year, I decided to add card content to the Victoria Marie YouTube channel, and this video is going to kick off that brand new content. Now, for those of you who've been with me for a while, don't worry, the scrapbooking content's still going to be around. I do want to pepper in some other things to keep us creatively inspired, and particularly for those of us who have been scrapbooking for a long time and we need kind of like a creative palette cleanser, I want to encourage you to indulge in your other paper crafting endeavors as well. And I'm going to share my adventures and my journeys with other paper crafting projects here on the channel. Scrapbooking content will still be the primary content that I feature here, but I'm going to offer some other things too, just to kind of keep stuff interesting. Now, here's where this all started. So like a lot of crafters, I tend to purchase a lot of supplies, and over the past few years, I've been purchasing a lot more card making supplies. But one of the things that I noticed is that I just wasn't using these supplies as often as I would like. I want to make sure that anything I invest my money in for my hobbies and even for my business are for supplies that I use on a regular basis. I have a ton of inks that, yes, of course, I use those for scrapbooking projects, but they can be used for other projects as well. And I have some stamping tools and whatnot that I've sort of collected over the years. So ultimately, I told myself that I need to put these things to good use for other projects other than scrapbooking. So to kick things off, I thought it would be fun to create 2 Valentine's cards. However, I'm using a non-traditional color theme and I'm using dies and paper from my stash. So let's get right into it. Now, the cool thing about the projects I'm going to make for you today is that basically all you need is solid cardstock and a die to create a similar look. And if you don't have dies, then pull out your punches. Or maybe perhaps put that electronic cutting machine to use, select a shape or icon that you like, and you can easily create a design with repetitive elements on it. Now for the first card, I'm using this little bitty heart die, and I'm going to show you how I work with that here in a minute. I've had this for maybe 3 or 4 years. It came as a freebie in an order. I also have this large stitched frame die from Lawn Fawn, as well as a sentiment die from CZ Designs. And from my paper collection, I pulled out some solid cardstock, and this cardstock is from Cardstock Warehouse. And you can see here that I have 4 different shades of gray that I'm going to use to create today's card projects. I like to challenge myself and see different types of color combinations, whether they're within the same color family or different color families, and get some usage out of my solid cardstock. The next card is a slimline card, and again, same vein. For this project, I am going to use this Elle Studios stamp and die set. However, I'm only going to use the heart dies to create the hearts. And there's a set that has a stitched border and a set that will punch out just solid hearts. And you're going to see the bonus card using that particular style of heart. Then I found in my stash that I totally forgot some slimline dies from the Ton, as well as a sentiment die that I received several years ago from Tonic. And I'm going to use a sentiment that says, "For you," here at the front of that slimline card. And I thought that was perfect. All right, so let's go ahead and get into card number 1. This is an A2 size card, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of die cutting. Now, my card making process is that if I'm using dies, or even if I'm stamping and using both stamps and dies, I'm going to do all my stamp and die work first, and then I'm going to construct the card. So I'm using a tiny little die cutting machine here, and it's called a Sidekick, and it's from Sizzix. This particular die will produce the outline of the heart in a stitched border, and then the center of that die is just a little solid heart. And I'm going to actually use both pieces for this card design. Now, while I'm die cutting and stamping elements, I like to turn on a little something on TV or listen to music and get everything cut out, so all I have to do is construct the card. Once I have the hearts and the frame cut out, I'm going to go ahead and cut out the sentiment. I'm using some vellum from Hero Arts, layering vellum, as well as some white cardstock to cut out the sentiment that says, "Love you." For this card, I'm using 2 card panels. The first one is the stitched border die panel that I used with my stitch border dies, and then the other one is just a solid A2 size 4¼ by 5½ panel, and I'll layer these together here in a second. I want to go ahead and work on the decorative part of the panel, so I'm taking all of the hearts, the little boxes with the hearts inside, and I'm lining those up so that 3 rows are at the top of that panel, and then of course my sentiment is going to be on the lower third of the panel. I'm using some Barely Art liquid glue to position all of these little heart boxes, and then inside of the hearts I'm going to inlay the little solid hearts that come out from the middle of this particular design. Some of these are going to be popped up with some foam squares, and I'm also alternating the colors of the gray hearts. That way it gives it a lot of interest. Now again, you can use any color cardstocks that you want. You can even use pattern cardstocks. And if you want to make it really interesting, if you have specialty paper like cork or vellum or glitter paper, that would also be a really good option for a design like this. So I'm adding in some adhesive there in the middle, some of the dots, inlaying the hearts, and then of course adding foam to some of the others, just to add a little bit of depth and dimension. Next, I'm going to stack the sentiment elements and of course layer that with the shadow layer made out of vellum, and that just adds a nice subtle contrast, kind of a break between the hearts and the sentiment. I'm going to adhere all of that with some liquid glue, and then to the back of this panel I just grabbed some scraps of foam that I have laying around. I like to use up all my scraps as much as possible, and just doing a little bit of dimension there on that first panel that I will then adhere to the 4¼ by 5½ white cardstock panel. I like adding dimension to my cards, but not too much, because if you're going to send it to the mail, then that can complicate things. So this card will be perfectly fine to send through the mail because it's not super dimensional, but it has enough dimension for interest. And here is the finished card. I love how this came out, and of course you can vary the color scheme. I went ahead and put that on a card base 4¼ by 5½, and this card is ready to be sent to a loved one. Next up is card number 2, and for this card I created a 3½ by 8½ inch slimline card. I absolutely love slimline cards, and it's great for doing these extended designs on the front of the card. So I'm taking this die. This is from Elle Studio. It does have a coordinating stamp set, but I'm just using the dies. This die will produce both hearts that have a stitched border as well as just a solid heart, and I'm actually going to use the solid hearts for a third project, which you'll see in just a moment. Once I have all of my hearts cut out in the various different color cardstocks, again, you can use whatever solid cardstock you want, specialty paper, pattern paper, it's completely up to you. I'm going to go ahead and start building out the card. Another thing that I want to do before I start that process, of course, is to cut out the sentiment, and the sentiment says "for you," very delicate sentiment, so I want to be kind of careful with that. And then I'm going to create a card panel using this Tonic slimline stitched border die, and you're not going to quite see the stitching on this because it's very, very subtle. I am putting that at an angle in my die cutting machine. That way it applies even pressure to the large die. Now it's time to construct the card. I'm going to go ahead and adhere the middle panel there, just kind of layering that up for a nice look. And then I'm going to start adhering the hearts. There's no rhyme or reason to this. You can position them however you want to. I'm going to do a full row across the length of the card. The third card you'll see, you won't actually see me make it, but I'll just show you the card. I'm actually going to use the solid cards just to create a little composition to the left side of the card. So you'll see that here in a second. So I'm just grabbing the hearts in whatever color of the shades of gray that I have there, adding some foam to some of the hearts for added dimension and interest. Once the hearts are all positioned, it's time to add the sentiment. So I'm using some liquid glue to stack the 4 U sentiments, very delicate, and then of course I'm going to adhere that to the outside of the card, just layering that right on top of those hearts. Using some more liquid glue, I'm going to take that panel and secure that to a slimline card base. And with that, this slimline card project is complete. I love those beautiful layered hearts. They're just so pretty. Again, you can use whatever cardstocks that you want and sentiments to create a similar composition. I also made a third card, and for this one, it's a slimline card, 3.5 by 8.5. I used the solid hearts from that same die I just used, the ones without the stitch border. I also used an embossing folder to add a little bit of texture on the card base, and then added a sentiment to the right side of the heart cluster, and that turned out beautiful. So this was a really fun card making session. I will tell you, I could go through all of my colored cardstock and probably make 10,000 more of these cards just simply using some basic supplies. So I'm going to challenge you to reach in your stash, find some things that you enjoy using, or maybe some stuff you haven't used in a long time to create something beautiful. So I hope you guys enjoy this card content. There's going to be more to come. I'll be using items from my stash and new stuff. Let me know in the comment section below if you like today's project and if you're excited to see more content here on the channel. Thank you so much for your support and for coming along on this journey with me. If you'd like to check out some of my previous card content, click on the videos there on screen and stay tuned for more card making adventures to come.